Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily podcast. Now, quick question. Have you ever met someone that even though you met them for the first time, maybe you've even just met them virtually, something happened, you just hit it off with them straight away and you could literally just talk, laugh for hours at a time? Well, that happened to me today when I met a great guy, and his name is Semmelroth. And even though we were just talking on Zoom, just seemed to hit it off. He got a great energy and a sense of fun and adventure, maybe a bit of mischief too. But he's got an inspirational story where he was in the army for 6 years. He served in Afghanistan, and where he led a red team and a threat intelligence team defending US assets across an entire continent. But I don't want to reveal any spoilers because he's got such an inspirational backstory, but he's also making a big difference in the world of cybersecurity today. So we're going to talk about why cybercrime is on the rise, why we don't have enough defenders fighting against it, how companies and non-tech professionals can solve that cybersecurity talent problem that we keep talking about. And also I want to talk about how vets can start successful businesses, and also ask Stefan to share any tips around how to preserve entrepreneurship challenges out there on Civvy Street. So we're going to talk about all that, his story and much more. But before we start today's interview, I just wanted to give a quick mention to our sponsors, because this month the podcast is brought to you by Flipper, which is the #1 marketplace to buy and sell online businesses and startups. So do you run your own online business? And have you ever considered selling your website, your store, your tech, or your app? Because with world-class combined matching technology, dedicated brokers and end-to-end services, all at the most efficient price, Flipper is making it simple to sell your online business. So to get a free valuation, visit my friends at flipper.com/techtalks, where each month thousands of online business owners exit with Flipper. Again, visit flipper.com/techtalks. That's FLIPPA. flipper.com/techtalks. So buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to Chicago, where Stefan Semmelroth is waiting to share his story with us today. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
My name is Stefan Semmelroth. I'm the Senior Director of Security at Avant Communications. And if we go back, my first incident response was in 2001. And Neil, I got to tell you, literally, I told the story of that incident response on another incident response on Monday morning. This industry is one that changes all the time, but the fundamentals have stayed the same since the first book on cybersecurity that I read in the early 90s. The fundamentals are the same, and it's really fun to watch companies change and watch organizations in the industry move, but the fundamentals are the same. So that's, for listeners, forget everything else. I'm a student of the fundamentals of cybersecurity and will continue to be for a long time.
Absolutely love that. And I'd love to dig a little bit deeper on there, go back before 2001. Can you remember where your passion for tech came from, or just a moment that put you on this path you're on today? And ultimately, what's your origin story? Because I believe you've got a pretty interesting backstory, right?
I'll let the audience be the judge of that. But we had an 486 with a math coprocessor. It'd been a hand-me-down machine that had been in the house for a little while that my dad had gotten. I don't even remember where he got it. I should ask him. Where he got it. But it had a 5 1/4 inch floppy disk, and you try to load Prince of Persia, and you'd put in one, and then you'd put in another one, and then eventually you might get some 16-bit color. Yeah. And one day I came home from school, and there was a 3 1/2 inch floppy disk in the bay right above the 5 1/4, and that blew my mind. Because prior to that, this was a box that was made and built, and it did one thing, and it would never change. And suddenly I came home from school, and it changed. And that's what hooked me. That was, I said, hey, can we take this apart? I didn't know you could do that. And so we looked at it, we dove deep into it. And then I started reading a lot of books about it, because back then, in cornfields of Northern Illinois, it was hard to find a mentor in this space. And so I'd go to the library, I'd go to Barnes and Noble, I'd find books. Now I'm dating myself even more. I'd read books on the subject, and then I started writing papers on them as well for school. And eventually what I ended up doing was, and this is before I could actually drive, I would call up CEOs. I found that we had a couple like tech companies in the area, mostly like, building and deploying desktops and maintaining them, and a little bit of like Novell, which was still on 3.5-inch floppies at the time. And I would call up these CEOs and say, hey, let me work for you for free. Can I just come in and interview? And they were taking my calls. So I'd get on my bike, my little 1-speed BMXer, and I would bike across town in, my unpressed white Oxford shirt. And I'd walk in and they were taking my meetings, and they're like, well, you don't really know Novell. You don't really know this stuff. And every time they said that, I said, well, there's a book on your desk. Just give me that book and I'll come back in 6 weeks and I'll do it. And eventually I got picked up for one of them and started pulling cables and doing ad moves changes and writing batch scripts, that, again, dating myself. And then that took off into eventually, responding to my first cyber incident in 2001, which was the NIMDA worm. And that was the story that I shared on this incident response on Monday, where we didn't know what the initial vector was. We didn't know how it got in. And, having read all these books at that point, I told my boss, hey, if we don't know the initial vector, we're going to go through and rebuild the entire network box by box. How do we know it's not going to come in behind us? And he said, hey, this is what everybody does in the space. You just burn it down. And sure enough, subnet by subnet, NIMDA followed us around. It propagated. And so we had to do the entire enterprise network twice. And that's the story that I told on Monday, because they hadn't identified the initial vector, and they had 35 sites all over the Pac West, and they were about to deploy a fleet of engineers to all of these sites to start reimaging, and they didn't know the initial vector. They didn't know the transmission method. And I said, how about you do that for just your core enterprise, what you need to stay alive business, while we simultaneously figure out the root cause and the propagation method, and then deploy all of those assets, which are expensive, because we don't want to rebuild a couple thousand endpoints twice.
Wow. And I was also doing a bit of research on you, Googling you, and I could, don't worry, it was all good, but I did come across something that you led a red team and a threat intelligence team in the military defending US assets across an entire continent. I mean, there's got to be a great story there too, right?
Oh, it was a blast. It was a blast. So I had, after those first few jobs, and then I was in sales engineering for a Cisco Platinum partner at the time, decades ago, I decided I wanted to go to college. So I put in and went to West Point, did electrical engineering there, came out of electrical engineering at West Point. And at that point, and I still believe this is true today, the most difficult, most challenging job in the world that you can have is as an infantry company commander in combat. Mm. And I said, okay, I'm going to go do that. And so I put my hat in the ring. I got picked up to go to the infantry, went to Ranger school, went to Afghanistan, and then came back and I found out I'd been injured. And I thought maybe the infantry is not right for me. So around that time, I ended up having reconstructive back surgery, woke up paralyzed, got feeling back, had to learn to walk again. And the Army was standing up this new CyberCore, this brand new branch of the Army. And I said, hey, why don't we, I did that before. I don't know how relevant those skills are. And that's why I say I'm a student of the fundamentals, because they don't change. And got picked up to be one of the Army's first barred, actual, with the little badge cyber officers. There were many men and women before me, but it was in an unofficial capacity. And this is one of the first ones where we were really scaling. And I'm fluent in Spanish. That was something that I did as a passion project over years. And so I said, hey, why don't you let me focus on Southcom? So everything south of Mexico, the entire continent of South America, I'll take that. Small bites, right?
Yeah. Wow.
with that, I got to do a lot of really interesting, challenging work with a lot of diverse stakeholders, diverse languages, and embassies with partners all across South America. And at the time, we were still standing up this task force as well, like this branch. And so I literally was doing incident response on one continent, got called to go do incident response on another continent for another state actor, and so it was all over the place, literally all over the world. And I believe, at least I trust, that the work that I did, a lot of the doctrine that I got to write, is still being used today. And I've heard from friends that it hasn't changed too much from that initial writing that I did, which is all based on the studies that I did back in the 90s.
Wow, it blows my mind. And that's one of the reasons I always ask the origin story question at the beginning of an interview, because it seems that everybody's got a story like that. It's a series of circumstances that almost feel unrelated at the time, but it's not until you look back, like the Steve Jobs quote, you look back and you can see where all those dots join for you, right?
Yeah, well, that's part of the beauty of this career is, and this career field, this industry, there's so many people that want to help and want to help build, continue, progress the industry, because it is so mission focused. It aligns so much with that protector mentality that it's a combined effort, and there's so many people that give back and recognize when you are the right fit and when you're not the right fit, and suddenly those chains start to build a story, and often they rhyme, and you end up finding your path instead of hunting for your path.
And that path would lead you to Avant Communications. So can you tell me more about the company, the problems that you try and solve with technology, just for people hearing about it for the first time?
Absolutely. Yeah. So let me tell you how I got here.
Yeah.
As well. So we'll do that origin as well. When I got out of the military, I started a veteran-focused cyber recruiting company. And the point behind that was, when we look at all of the transitioning personnel that are trained very, very well in the U.S. military and our partner services, they're often unknown unknowns in commercial. No one knows who they are, what they do, because we worked in rooms with no windows and couldn't talk about it. And so my thought process in the thesis was, how do we take those people and make their lives better by aligning their post-military career with a vision and a mission? And I ended up selling that company to another partner called StrataCore, and stayed on. I got to build their vCISO practice, their consulting practice, and really their security go-to-market strategy as a line item. And this is a few years ago now. Most of the industry knows value-added resellers, but they don't know the broker channel, the agent broker channel. And so here I am building this new go-to-market strategy for security vendors and aligning client needs with the vendors, and then identifying, limitations not of the company, but of the industry as a whole. And I said, okay, how do I go solve those problems? Those are some big problems, and I don't have the market weight here that I need to. And so I went to Avant Communications, who was a partner at the time, and I basically built a 30, 60, 90-day plan, and I slid it across the table, and I said, let me build this for you. Let me build this. These are the obstacles that I want to overcome for this industry, because in this industry, it's amazing. First off, instead of representing one vendor and their tools, I get to represent a myriad of vendors, which means I get to bring in the right partner, the right service, the right tool at the right time, instead of just what one company has to offer. So I believe this is the answer to that age-old CISO consulting question of, how do I still remain agnostic and bring in a vendor? So that's how I got here. And the vision has been, first you come on, you take a deeper inventory, understand where you're at, figure out where you need to go, and then start backwards planning. And the vision in general right now is, how do we fulfill 90% of needs for any given client in any industry at any size within a week?
Well,
yeah.
Within a week. Man.
within a week. Yep. So if a company, like a client, comes to us and through our partners,
Yeah.
so and that's part of, I'll go deeper to where we actually fit.
Yeah.
If we look at many of the, like, even the partners that you were talking about that we know today before the show,
Yeah.
when we look at many of those vendors in the space, they might have a referral program, but referral programs don't necessarily incentivize partners to stay engaged, and they don't incentivize partners to think long term. So our channel is like a referral program on steroids, and we bring in engineers and architects. We bring in full court press to make sure and validate that what it is a client is getting is what they need, not just now, but for 5-10 years from now.
Yeah.
And that ability to solve problems is pretty key. So the way that we work is we're effectively at the distributor level. So those partners that many of them have been on your show, those partners, they have a hard time managing like thousands of individual small business owner consultants out all across the world. So what we say is we will take that load. We will help set a vision for them. We will help train them. We will help engage them. And that way, when you vendor, you only have to rely on one company, us, to access a couple thousand sales consultants across the world, independent sales, small business owners, which for anybody in the call, I've done that. I know that pain. I respect you. But we basically are that clearinghouse for those problems to be solved.
Wow. And you mentioned that the week there, you could hear a pin drop. It's just incredible. But everyone has to move at an incredible speed now to any chance of defending against these attacks, because there is a great deal of uncertainty in the world at the moment with global conflict. So on that side of things, can you tell me more about the Russia-Ukraine war and how that possibly necessitates a review of cybersecurity best practices too?
Absolutely. So having a background in some policy and, interstate conflict, for anybody that's interested in learning about part of how we got to where we are right now, the book I recommend is by Andy Greenberg, and it's called Sandworm. We didn't know at the time that was going to be the forebearers of a land war in this magnitude. But it's absolutely a great book to understand how a state goes through and builds tools and develops those tools to send a message and hold infrastructure at risk. So some of the lessons learned through the multifaceted onslaught of cyber activity in both directions has been absolutely huge. So one of the takeaways, if we start looking at, that's just the state actor of effectively Russia. When we look at the non-state actors, like the ransomware groups that exist out there, the case study that I like to talk about the most, because we have the most open source intelligence about them, is the Conti ransomware group. CONTI, Conti ransomware group. Because Conti's has employees in all over the world. And when Russia invaded Ukraine, Conti came out and said, we are aligning ourselves with Russia. And we said, Conti said, any state government that takes cyber actions against Russia, we, Conti, will come attack you. And that was obviously that by itself is interesting. Very interesting. So to that end, Conti actually ransomwared the government of Costa Rica and said, hey, Costa Rica, if you don't pay up, we, Conti, are going to initiate a coup against you.
Whoa.
Yes. So that's like, this isn't science fiction anymore. This is actual real life. And here's the other piece. When Conti came out in support of Russia, they had entire dev teams in the Ukraine. And if I'm if my mafia boss is coming out against the company that's invading me, now I've got some internal conflict. And what some of those dev teams did is they released 170,000 internal chat messages from the Conti crew. And those have been translated to English. You can go out and you can read them. You can dive through and you can map them. So for anybody in OSINT, it's a treasure trove. Yeah. But when they did that, we now know by handle, by name, who does recruiting, who does training and onboarding, who HR is. We know the names of their A, B, and C team leaders. We know how they break out. Like, we know how big their quality assurance team is around their code base. We know who their partners are externally. So we know all of this. And oh, by the way, their entire playbook was leaked. So for anybody in marketing here or anybody starting your company, Conti uses the same dang sales tools that you probably use. And my question to you is, do the bad guys use your tools better than you, or are you better at your tools than them?
Oh, no, that's insane.
Yeah. And it's real world now. Like we know their playbook. We know how they operate. We know their names. And then really now it's coming down to, can we isolate their financing through cryptocurrency? And can we build the international policy for extradition in order to take these people and put them in front of a judge, jury?
And of course, there's so much excitement at the moment for things like smart cities, but that can also add vulnerabilities. And according to a recent FBI warning, there's an evolving intelligence that Russia is exploring options for potential cyber attacks against the US, and more specifically, the critical infrastructure over there. So how can businesses and consumers alike better protect themselves from an attack like this?
Yeah, so I think, right now, effectively in the US, we're in part of that voting season. Yeah. And the ways that US citizens can be actively involved in their own critical infrastructure is really often three ways. One is by voting for the referendums that will align tax dollars to protecting things like our waterways, to protecting things against like our desalination plants, to protecting things against wastewater and sewage plants. And the second way is to write your Congress people, write your leaders, pen and paper, and say, we are concerned about this. And then, so you can vote for the referendums, you can vote for the people, you can write your people. And then also, the third way is really time and money. So can you volunteer? So for any, junior cybersecurity practitioners that might be listening to this, one of the things I say is just to go see if you can volunteer and help. Expect a background check, but volunteer, go help. And then potentially some municipalities will let you donate to causes as well. So you could potentially vote with your money as well.
And with cybercrime being on the rise, there's also the reality that we don't have enough defenders fighting it against it. I think the cybersecurity industry has got a 0% unemployment rate. In Asia Pacific alone, they're saying there's a 3 million shortfall of people. So, and as soon as you have a cybersecurity professional, as soon as they put something on their LinkedIn profile, they're likely to be headhunted or snapped up. So how can companies and equally non-tech professionals play a part in solving this cybersecurity talent problem?
Yeah, so there's a few different routes. Yeah. One that I say in this space, because of that negative deficit, is if you're not outsourcing, you're not winning. And when we look at it, who is scooping up these practitioners? It's often the vendors. Because the vendors have scope and scale, which means they have efficiencies, which means they can drive the cost down overall. So if you're not going out and looking at partners to execute these functions, then that's something I strongly recommend, to the point where even if you look at industry reports right now, like identity access management, privileged access management, if you read the industry reports, the luminaries that put pen to paper and explain how to work it, they tell you don't buy the tool. They tell you go find a service partner that understands your industry, hire them and use whatever tools they use because you probably can't do it yourself. The second piece that I'll say here is, for those other like wicked sharp CISOs that are out there, and for the vendors, choose tech stacks that you can train easily on, that will get you to where you need to be, but that you can train people easily on, so you can broaden your hiring portfolio. And also choose tech stacks that your local universities and boot camps are teaching. Because that way you're strategically aligning all of your talent development, find, hire, train, and retain talent. You're aligning that with the talent development sources locally. So all you have to do is sit there and interview before they take their final exam. And now you've got them. Like, engineering industry, traditional engineering disciplines have understood this for decades and decades, but cybersecurity seems to not get that piece. So, maybe in the show notes, I've got a couple of podcasts on that specifically with people like Tia Hopkins, the field CISO at eCentire. She has done exactly that, and that's part of why she's winning in the industry right now.
Well, so you have to send me the links after we finish recording today, and I'll put them in the show notes so people can check that out. And if I was to ask you to reflect on your inspiring origin story, which we began with in your military background there, can you offer any insights for any vets that are listening on how they too might be able to follow in your footsteps, start successful businesses, and any tips they can use to preserve entrepreneurship challenges?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So we could, Neil, we could do this for probably 12 to 14 hours. So I'll be succinct. The first piece is, by all means, go stand on the shoulders of giants.
Yeah.
That is probably the best single point of advice I can give to any of the vets out there. And as we're recording this, it's November 9th here in the US, and it's about to be Veterans Day. So it's a very poignant time. When we look at that transition, for those of you that happen to be in the signals corps, and especially in the Five Eyes nations, for those of our friends and partners and brothers and sisters in arms that happen to be in the security, like cybersecurity landscape, your transition will be easier. It's more of understanding the different languages and learning terms like EBITDA. As we look separately for the veterans that did not, our military intelligence professionals, our infantrymen, and now infantry women that are out there, you still understand people. You 100% understand people, and you understand how people think. You understand how people try to skirt the rules. You understand the defensive posture, and you understand the mission. And funny, the more we distill what security is, it is about people. So don't think, and there's many voices out here that I staunchly disagree with that say that in order to get into security, you must learn the fundamentals of help desk and the fundamentals of assembling a computer, and then go through the fundamentals of networking and the fundamentals and fundamentals and fundamentals. To that, I say, nay, sir.
Yeah.
Because when we look at a cybersecurity company, yes, they have engineers, but they also have sales, they have paralegals, they have lawyers, they have marketers, and you can do what you are best at in the world. It does not necessarily mean you need to know how pop, push works in assembly. If you understand people, you can get in this industry significantly faster than spending 18 to 24 to 36 months learning how packets traverse a network.
100%. It's so important, that people element, and it often gets missed. So it's so refreshing to hear you say that. And of course, I am conscious that there's a lot of doom and gloom out there and a lot of concern, and quite rightly too. But also, there's a lot to be hopeful and a lot to be positive about. So are there any particular tech trends that excite you right now? Because we are at that time of the year where we're starting to, what tech trend's going to dominate 2023? Is there anything that's caught your eye?
Well, first off, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the timeliness of it being quarter 4. And quarter 4 is DDoS season for e-commerce and gaming industries. So if you happen to be in those industries, go find a trusted advisor that can get you DDoS protection. Also, this is kind of that like transition into December into that March timeframe is also when historically we've seen those larger SolarWinds and Kaseya type events. So watch for those and be prepared to patch quickly as fast as you can. And that's one of those questions that I often ask in an incident response or consulting pre-breach is how fast can you deploy software? Now, getting back to the core of your question, one of the things I'm most excited about right now is the convergence between connectivity providers and security overlay. So going from circuits to software-defined networks at the SD-WAN, and then now to the SASE convergence, which is now the connectivity in SD-WAN plus SSE, the secure service edge. So with really that one customer edge device, you can now pipe all your traffic through, get virtual firewalls that are constantly updated, threat intelligence, visibility into your network traffic without having to go deploy a significant, substantial number of boxes, virtual or hardware, that you need to then operate and maintain. That convergence is very exciting. And then the other piece that I'm very excited about right now is privileged access management and the focus on the fundamentals and doing things right. Who can access to what, where, and how, and when, so that way we get a good understanding, prevent things from happening, and all of that ties in to John Kindervag's formation of zero trust and that philosophy. So all of that together, when people talk about re-architecting the internet for security, what they're really talking about is re-architecting for zero trust. So we're starting to see the industry converge and move in that direction.
And we've talked a lot about what you're doing for other people and how people are coming to you and businesses are coming to you for help and assistance. But what's next for you? Where do you go from here? And what makes you hopeful about the future of security and maybe a conversation that we'll be having next year? Maybe things will be improving, but what makes you more hopeful?
So here's some of the stats that I'll share on my hope. And I like to tell our partners that my job is not to increase fear. My job is to take a fear and plan against it so we can reduce that fear, we can reduce uncertainty, and we can reduce doubt. So what I'm seeing right now is boards being more concerned about having the cybersecurity conversation. In fact, when I look at the opportunities that we solve and the problems that we solve, I say that there's five reasons that we see a substantial increase in cybersecurity. And one of those is a new board member that came from a company that had been breached previously. Yeah. And when we look at that, Gartner says that by 2025, 40% of boards will have a cybersecurity focused committee. I would like that number to be up, but I'll take what I can get. And because we're even having those conversations now, those conversations where it used to be bottom up and now it's top down, we're seeing more CISOs with a business focus that have an MBA. We're seeing more of that. It used to be you couldn't find them. There was like 3 guys 10 years ago. Now we're seeing more of them. And using security as a revenue driver is absolutely huge. And to answer your question about where I'll be, I plan on staying here. I put my word on building this program out, and I'm going to build it out. And I've taken some big bets, and we're starting to see the numbers that those are paying off. So I want to continue doing what I said I would do, and I don't plan on changing in the near future.
Absolutely love that. And I cheer you on every step of the way. It would be great to have you back on next year and continue to follow you on that journey. But of course, we started the podcast today talking about your origin story, where that passion for tech came from. And none of us are able to achieve success without a little help along the way. Sometimes it can be a particular person that has invested in us, seen something that nobody else has seen, or just spent a little time or pointed us in the right direction. So if I was to say, who would you be most grateful towards and who helped you get where you are, who would that be that we can give a little shout out and acknowledgement to today?
Yeah, I would say really 2 Army colonels back at West Point, Scott Ransbottom and Grant Jacoby. They both really took me under their wing, and they were in the electrical engineering and computer science department. And they helped me peel back the layers over and over and over again. And they were, both of those men were sounding boards for me when I had uncertainty and doubt, when I questioned myself. And then another Army colonel, Jose Ocasio-Christian, gave me a chance and brought me in to do due diligence at a venture capital firm that was focused on space, literally like the moon. Wow. So that opportunity was phenomenal. And that was where I got to really open my eyes to the financial venture capital private equity space and the go-to-market strategy for non-standard technologies, which was a ton of fun, right? They're just absolutely fun. And then kind of rounding out that, the fourth person I would say would be Chris Werpy, who we at Avant just got through our Planet One acquisition. And when Chris Werpy and I sit down and we go into a room and we brainstorm and walk out, everyone gets a little nervous because they know change is coming. And I'd say that those four people have been really accelerants on my career.
Fantastic. So good to hear. It'd be great to hopefully they will get to listen to this and hear the impact that they've had on your career. And
so thank you, gentlemen.
Yeah, a big thank you to you all. And before I let you go, for anyone listening, just wanting to find out more information about Avant Communications, anything we talked about, or even contacting you or your team, what's the best way of doing that?
Absolutely. So our website is goavant.net. And if you reach out and you're interested in becoming a trusted advisor and bringing me, my team, and the other practice leads on calls to help you with your clients and solve problems, that is the best way to become a trusted advisor. Now, we are very active in our blog. We publish research. We just published in late August our Security NIST 612 report. And that is a report that we wrote that looks at where's the industry going to be in 6 months and in 12 months. And then we do addendums to that moving forward. So if you want to know about how security leaders are thinking about security right now, go check out that report. And then we produce a lot of training for our trusted advisors. And it's right now, that future is the cyber defense matrix that Sunil Yu over at Jupiter One wrote. He gave us permission to use it. So every call that we are on right now, we are using that matrix because it is and will continue to be the future cybersecurity, and it will be in our next 612 report. So you can also find me on LinkedIn. I'm of all the social media platforms, LinkedIn is where I'm active the most because I want people to win. And I'm not doing it this year. But previous years, I'd been mentoring one-on-one about 200 to 300 people a year to start companies or to get into cybersecurity or to do what I did and build a CISO practice. I'm doing much fewer of that this year, but my challenge is go out and mentor the next generation because those are dividends that will continue to pay and pay and pay, and it's just the right thing to do.
Wow, what an incredible journey you've been on there. I cannot thank you enough for sharing it. From beginning with floppy disk drives and rushing out on that BMX bike to the military, where you are now, and also giving back and investing in the next generation. So powerful. I feel like we could chat with each other for hours, but this is a daily tech podcast. So we'll have to agree to regroup next year and follow your journey, see what's happening then. But more than anything, just thank you for spending a bit of time with me today.
Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure. I love doing this, and it is a passion to give back to the industry. And that's probably why I found myself in security anyway. So if you're interested in this industry, go read a couple books. We've got articles, we've got podcasts, and then check out my LinkedIn page because we've got me, my team, and some partners. We do a lot of open source articles. So go check them out. We've got a how to learn cybersecurity over your weekend, how to get involved if you're transitioning out of the military. And then we've got a podcast coming out with our partners over at Resourcive on how to go hire veterans, bring them on transition, and do it as a fellowship where you get to bring them on for 6 months for free while they're still being paid for by the US government. So if you like 6 month long interviews to see if they're the fit, go check that out that content. And I'm sure Neil and I can get it into show notes afterwards. Thank you so much for having me. And I'm excited to see how this talk will help your audience increase, up level their skills, and go out into the unknown being confident.
Well, I'll add all those links to the show notes so people can find that nice and easily. Again, just thanks for joining me today.
Cheers.
As they say over here in the UK, Stefan is an absolute legend. Could have chatted with him for hours, had so much fun. And next time I'm in Chicago, I'm going to meet up with him and Darren from Keeper Security, and we'll get up to mischief eating cheddar and caramel Chicago mixed popcorn, amongst other things. Sounds like a plan. So, Stefan, if you are listening back, a huge thank you for bringing your energy to the show today and your insights and expertise, and a few tips along the way too. And for everyone listening, you've heard from me, you've heard from Stefan. What would you like to add to today's conversation? Did we miss anything? Do you have any additional questions? Would you like to come on the podcast? Whatever it is, email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, just @NeilCHughes. Let's keep this conversation going. And I also invite you to join me again tomorrow. We'll explore a completely different topic with a human story about how technology is impacting our life, business and world, all washed down with a human story. So hopefully you'll join me again, but a big thank you for listening today. And until next time, don't be a stranger.